Welcome, everyone. My name is Amos Joseph, and this is the 10K Rum Podcast. Now, for the first time ever, we are actually having a guest co-host because Brooke is on a little bit of a vacation in Iceland with a certain woman. So, for the first time ever, we're having Corey, or if you guys have seen our previous shows, Conk, on from that last time. How's it going today, Corey?
Oh yeah, I'm doing good. I'm the artist formerly and currently known as Conk. So, life's good. I'm trying to sell all my stuff right now. I'm about to move about 30 minutes away, try to get closer to my work because I hate commutes. So,
Now, today we're going to be talking about a very different topic. We're going to be talking about futurism, and actually Corey and I were talking a whole bunch. I'd say about 10, 15 minutes before the show, and going all over the place with it. Now, man, we had a lot of topics to go through. Where do you want to start?
yeah, I think in order to talk about the future of humanity, you have to talk about the current state of humanity as this setup piece, the preface.
Yep.
And my consensus is right now sucks. You know what I mean? Every generation always says that, like, right now sucks. It was way better when I was younger, way better back in the day. Every civilization says that. You can see it in like Greek and Roman textures and stuff. But I think right now particularly sucks because we've created a huge systemic thing. And I'm not talking about systemic racism or sexism or anything like that. I'm talking about, like, we have a large system that's getting more and more global, and we're seeing a lot of things. Even though we're technologically progressing from that standpoint, we're still seeing a lot of negative side effects of that, such as increased mental health illness, increased physical health illness. I think right now in Homo Deus, they say we just recently, a couple years ago, switched from people dying of not eating enough to people dying for eating too much as a global scale.
Oh yeah, heart disease, obesity, stuff like that.
Yeah. So yeah, we've just had that paradigm shift where people are dying of overfeeding instead of underfeeding. So to me, even though we're talking about how much progress we're making, there's still a lot of bad side effects of that a lot of people don't discuss. Do you see that too?
Yeah, I guess the proper term would be decadence.
Yeah.
And it has happened multiple times in our, I guess, in history. It kind of happened with the Romans, the Greeks. Some civilizations have fallen because of it. But now it's more happening, not just one civilization, but also just the planet as a whole. Like, most countries are kind of coming to this point. You've got us, you've got pretty much Europe, North America, parts of Asia. Africa is playing catch up, but they're going to probably hit that in the next century. But yeah, everyone's kind of going down that same path where everything is so good that it's so bad. If that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's a critical issue a lot of people don't want to talk about, especially because, like, when you look in the political spectrum or like the media perspective, a lot of people aren't talking about the downsides. You know what I mean? Occasionally you'll see a piece about mental health or suicide or physical health, but they're still talking about, sexism and racism and all of these kind of things and platforms that politicians are speaking on that are like minor issues, because a lot of them, sure, they're important, but they're not dealing with like the fate of humanity. I think they're fighting and complaining and yelling at each other over very relatively small issues compared to the mass death rates we have for health.
I call it societal boredom.
Yeah.
We basically have become so enamored with what we have. Well, we're not appreciating what we have. It sounds, a little bit boomerish, but we're not appreciating what we have, and we're more focusing on what we don't have. And what we don't have is so little, but we try to exploit that. Like, is race, like you're saying, is racism still a thing? Yes, but is it as big of a deal as it ever been? No. Is sexism a thing? Is just prejudice, oppression, things like this? Yeah, a lot of that stuff still happens, but instead of focusing on that, should be focusing on progress. I think, to a point, though. I mean, there is such a thing. I think it's too much progress in some aspects. It's like, you have this strong push of, like, basically where you're shoving down everyone's throat about, well, pretty much anything.
Mhm.
You have to, if, especially for us guys, if you don't want to date a trans woman, you're
Yeah.
transphobic, and it's like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think it goes into like when you talked about social boredom, I think that makes sense. Humans by nature are conflictual and adaptive. And so, in order to adapt, there has to be a conflict for which you to adapt from. But since we have a relative time of peace, sure, we still have wars here and there that are relatively small, but for the last 30 or 40 years, we haven't had any big major draft people wars. Everybody's still pretty damn comfortable. Like if I was homeless tomorrow, I would still get 2 or 3 meals a day. There's still plenty of shelters and places like that where I could be outside of the rain and the elements. Um, like even on the lowest rung, we still have a lot of things going for us. And because of that, I think we are trying to find problems that aren't necessarily there or as pivotal as we think they are, because we want to grow and adapt on stuff, but there's not a lot of stimulus. We have to create it ourselves. And I think you can see that in politics too, where like, I don't know if you've noticed this, but almost every debate is like straw man versus straw man. You know what I mean? Where they have to essentially create cartoon characters to attack because the real ones aren't really there.
You ever watch so there's a YouTuber I watch called Freedom Tunes. You ever watch that?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Look up Freedom Tunes. He actually has a series of videos called Strawman versus Strawman.
Oh, really?
It's literally two straw men, like cartoon straw men, that would argue, and basically they, of course, they're both like straw manning each other. Like it's funny.
Mhm.
He did one that was right after Charlottesville, and the whole Charlottesville thing with the alt right and whatever. And he did one where it was like a Nazi versus a communist. Both both strawmanning each other. He did one where it was like the left and the right on healthcare. They were strawmanning each other, but it was called Debates with Strawmen.
Oh, yeah.
It's a whole series of videos he's done. It's really good because you look at it and a couple of them are really good. A couple of them kind of make you go like, wait, what? They're actually like how like actual Nazis and actual like Antifa sort of communist types are actually not too different when you look at them.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of goes into like, it's really interesting because it kind of goes into what I've been seeing is like a lot of our society and machine global, functioning involves trying to push people into a two-party system for everything. And I think it almost turns into sports where it's like, oh, you hate the Yankees, well, I hate the Mets, blah, blah, blah. But we're starting to apply that to everything. Oh, if you're not Antifa, you're a Nazi. Oh, if you're not right wing, then you're a Nazi or Antifa or whatever. You know what I mean? And I think that goes with that strawman argument where like a lot of people are just being forced into binaries. Almost every decision. Are you pro-choice or pro-life? Are you this or that? Are you this or that? You know what I mean? I don't know if you've seen that too as well.
Yeah, if you're not for us, you're against us. You can't really have a middle ground. And like when I was in some of the jobs that I did, especially around the time of the election, when I was the job I had at the time of the election and right after involved interacting with a lot of like customers and clients. And what I would do, people would start talking about politics, and part of the job is don't talk about politics, but people would still bring it up and they'd start having a conversation, and I just kind of look at them and I'd be like, all right, well, I would honestly change the conversation by just going, yeah, I didn't even vote for either one. And they kind of look at me and they go, you didn't vote? Oh no, I voted Libertarian for Gary Johnson. And they look at me and go, oh really? Like it kind of challenges them, but at the same time intrigues them, like, huh. So that's how I've kind of dealt with it. But then when I kind of go like, well, yeah, some things that are being done are good, some things that are being done are not good, and they kind of go, then they kind of that's where they get pulled back into the binary of like, you got to be this or that. Like, you can't be, if you try to debunk the wage gap, you're obviously a sexist. If you try to argue, less government, you're obviously just a full blown anarchist that wants to,
Yeah.
see the oppressed being exploited or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch
Yeah,
of stuff.
it's pretty crazy how that all works. I mean, to me, I think the root issue is, and especially, we use that terminology a lot in red pill stuff, but like the concept of unplugging, I think is super important, where you're able to, instead of being swayed to one side of the masses or the other, you disconnect, you unplug, and you just look at it for yourself, And I feel like our society today is discouraging that heavily because the system is based on being in one of the two sides of the masses, which are actually, like we talked about the strawman stuff, they're actually more alike than we think. You know what I mean? And so it feels like we're doing an us versus them, but really we're all still fitting into the machine. So,
but now to kind of move things along a little bit, since there's all this stuff going on and how much stuff is like really sucks about today, how do you think we're still managing to make some progress? Like there's still technology coming out. We're still getting, well, depending upon your opinion, we're still getting better at smartphones. We're still getting, there's still technology coming out, smart cars now. How do you think, how is that all still happening then, even though like, shit's crazy,
Yeah. Well, I have two parts of this, I guess. To like directly answer the question, I would say, capitalism, even though we're fighting it right now, it's still a thing and we're still going to improve for the better because the money is in the progression and the new and better thing. That's why they make a new iPhone every 8 seconds that does one thing slightly better and all of that, because there is still a money incentive to it. But to say it in a more abstract way, I think I want to ask, like, because we are making progress, is that necessarily a good thing? If our progress so far has increased our physical health issues and our mental health issues and all of these issues, like, is progress necessarily a good thing? To me, I see it like Jurassic Park. Like we're in a big Jurassic Park experiment where we're finding ways that we could, but we're not asking if we should. And then we're all going to get eaten by dinosaurs that we thought just looked cool, a couple days ago.
I'd say as a whole, like we have every means at our disposal to be better.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so the health problem, gyms are everywhere. Food is everywhere. We're able to eat healthier. We're able to stay in shape without having to subject ourselves to too much of the elements.
Mm-hmm.
And mental health. There really isn't that much to be anxious about.
Yeah.
But then like the average American is three times as anxious as an average like Somalian. War-torn Somalia actually has a third of the anxiety level that we do, which is crazy to think about. Like,
yeah, I think, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but yeah, it's just we have everything. Like, I think progression. It's not so much, like if we should. It's more just if we should now. Like we're progressing, which is fine, but we're progressing faster than we can assimilate sort of the new changes. If that makes sense.
Yeah, an analogy I heard recently that I thought was really interesting is like, if you realize our technologically is kind of getting exponentially better. Like if you were in the year 1890 or 1900, and you go back and you talk to one of them and you say, in 50 years we're going to invent a plane and we're going to nuke 2 cities. They're going to go, A, what the hell is a plane? And B, what the hell is a nuke? You know what I mean? That was within 40 or 50 years between the invention of an airplane and us bombing people in World War II with nukes using planes.
Yeah. Just like, we'll have the ability to fly and obliterate cities.
Yeah. If you told somebody that 45 years before World War II, they'll have no idea what the hell you're talking about. They'll think you're talking about some weird philosophical metaphysics thing. But we made it a reality pretty damn fast.
They probably think you're talking some like world-ending stuff, like, it's the end of the world. It's like, no, we just have.
But I mean, to make an argument for that, but it's not the mainstream one. But I'm saying that because like we're progressing so fast and so crazy. Like even looking at video games, the super realistic VR games we have now, Like 10 years ago, we were just excited about a GameCube and being able, Nintendo 64 being able to play Mario in 3D, even though it just looked like a bunch of shapes and squares that were colored. We're just technologically progressing very fast. But the faster we do it, the more I think risk there is to crash. So like we upgraded from a slow and steady bus to a motorcycle doing a wheelie at 100 miles an hour. You know what I mean? Sure, it feels better and it looks cooler and all that stuff, but your margin for error is getting smaller and smaller to a catastrophe. Does that make sense? Or am I?
You mean the margin for error is getting larger, you mean?
No. Isn't margin of error how much you can screw up before it collapses? Because if you're in a slow and steady VW bus,
yeah.
But if you're on a motorcycle doing a wheelie, one little small move one way or the other, you're gonna.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got terms mixed up a bit there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so when we talked before the show, I know we talked about that thing, the Kardashev scale, the type 1, type 2, type 3 civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that a lot of at least theoretical physicists talk a lot about it because they're looking at the future and stuff like if you ever watch that guy Michio Kaku, he's like the Japanese guy with the crazy hair or the white hair, and he's just talking about the future and all the time. So every night, sometimes sounds a little kooky, but like when he talks about like really concrete stuff, like he's talking about so for us the type 0, technically if you actually did the math on this scale, or like a 0.7 type civilization, but what the transition into a type 1, he says, is considered like the most violent, so to speak. Basically, and this brings up a whole other slew of topics, but the transition to allow us to like be able to harness and like control, basically be able to manage our planet on a scale where we can, whether it's we can harness all the geothermal energy or something, or just or if you want to say be able to control the climate, things like that. Kind of basically, this is where you get into like Star Trek. Star Trek is considered a type 1 civilization. That transition tends to be most violent because it requires a level of cooperation. Either the planet is not going to have to cooperate, or it's going to somehow have to be subject to. Either way, basically the planet has to be united somehow.
Mm-hmm.
All of mankind has to basically make that transition. And as we are now, we wouldn't work too well together.
Yeah, I don't think our human biology has caught up to do that. Like we are still even though we have the progression of industry and agriculture and all those things, I feel like our psychology and our biology still thinks we're hunter-gatherers. Like I think agriculture was invented 10 or 12,000 years ago, but we had 200,000+ years of not doing that. And I think that's where a lot of our physical and mental health issues come from right now, is because we still haven't even adopted that wholeheartedly, for our own biological systems. You can see, the rise in paleo and keto and carnivore diets that are curing a bunch of things because they're trying to go back to pre-agriculture, and they're actually seeing some pretty good success with it,
Yeah.
So I think if we wanted to do that, we're going to have to wait a lot longer than we think. But I feel like humanity is kind of on a doomsday clock right now. We're on the motorcycle doing the wheelie. So either we got to gun it and hope we get to the finish line that solves all these problems, or we need to hit the brakes and go back. I think right now is dangerous.
Even slowing down, I think, would be fine, though. Don't you think?
Yeah, but I think we have to slow down way farther than we think. If we're using the full evolutionary aspect, like how many thousands of years do we need to sit and eat grains for us to just metabolize that's the right thing,
Right. And how many? So with you and I, in the red pill, like that's kind of what we are using is understanding that human nature, specifically female nature, is still very much run by instincts, run by a lot of behaviors that
tribal social hierarchies,
exactly like, which is surprisingly why capitalism works. Like I've got Brooke and I have mutual friends that are basically really trying to, like, sort of preach, people who are associated with weird ministry, trying to push a lot of this, like, well, collaboration and cooperation is better than competition. I'm like, in principle, maybe, but in practicality, people do better when they compete.
Yeah.
Human nature allows us to compete because we're still very Darwinian in our nature. Like, we still you find the most innovation, like was it Neil deGrasse Tyson? A lot of people have heard of him. He talked about, like, if you had two teams of engineers working, like, you had one team of engineers that basically was like, all right, I want you to invent something, and you give them unlimited resources. Well, they're just going to sit there all day and be tinkering and probably not really give you much. But if you have the other team and you say, okay, I want you to invent something, and we're going to limit your resources to, let's say, there's 10 guys, $1 million, you got a month.
Yeah.
Here's the things you're limited to use.
Yeah, because it's a direct challenge versus whatever you feel like,
And that's the thing, is like with this mentality of, like, because we do have, virtually unlimited resources and everything that we could do, but it's by creating that and thriving off of that, I guess you could say, like, scarcity or that restriction, that we grow and we thrive, which is tapping into our primal nature with capitalism. But then, like, socialism, communism, or even just some variant where it's like allowing people to, like, kind of Andrew Yang's whole, like, well, yeah, if you introduce this UBI, you have this free money, people will, like, pursue passions and dreams, and it's like, probably not.
They're going to be like, oh, I get $1,200 a month, I'm going to live, so that's all I need. I'm not going to go. Very few people will be ambitious enough to strive for something more. By
your 80-20 rule, only about 20% of the people are actually going to do much with it, and then the other 80% are probably just going to, like, actually
Netflix. Yeah.
You're going to have, like, a lower quality of life for those people, actually, because they're just going to be like, well, if I just live well below in my means, and I'm just doing this and that, like, they're not challenged to do anything. Whereas the system, as much as it is this, we talked about the cogs and all that.
Yeah.
Still need
removing 80% of the cogs. I'm pretty sure that machine isn't going to function very well.
Yeah. I mean, we still need, as much as it can sound cold, we still need, fast food workers, pizza makers, garbage men. Well, not garbage men. Garbage men make good money.
Yeah, they got an important job. Nobody wants a bunch of sneaking trash in their house for a year.
Yeah, low wage, basic jobs that still keep things turning. You have, I think it's like, I don't know. There's like a bunch of statistics that basically show, like, if you really look at, like, percentage wise, these low wage sort of fast food or grocery store type jobs, just like purely entry level jobs that usually kids pick up, they're actually pretty large sum of all the jobs that are out there.
Yeah.
And if those people all just were subsidized with this UBI, or just given the unlimited resources, like with those engineers, not going to produce anything. It's not going to be beneficial to the whole.
Yeah. I think that's a good jumping point to one of the potential futures that a lot of people are dabbling about. So my thing right now sucks. Like I said before, we're in uncharted territory with our speed of progress and how humans have adapted to it. We're adapting very poorly. So a lot of philosophers and books and big thinkers are all thinking of solutions to that. I think one of the big solutions right now is like artificial intelligence and robots, because that comes into the UBI situation where that if we do automate, the pizza makers and the cashiers, we're going to need UBI because there's no jobs, because the vast majority of do this, earn a paycheck jobs are going to go to robots, right? And so the more we spend and analyze and research robotics and artificial intelligence, the less humans are going to be relevant in our own society. And so I think a lot of people are trying to deal with that problem. And UBI was one of the ideas, but like we said, there's a lot of issues that kick back from that.
The whole automation problem, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tricky one because the same thing was said about the Industrial Revolution. So I seriously challenge the idea that like a majority of, I mean, there's always people that are going to be losing and gaining jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wonder if, what's going to happen. Like if, are people going to create more jobs? Like, so we talked about like entrepreneurs, like, so we're, for the audience, Corey and I are involved in this guy Richard Cooper's men's group, men's community, and a lot of guys in there like really talk a lot about like entrepreneurship. And we thought like, well, gee, if everyone became an entrepreneur, then it'd be fine, right?
Yeah, no, it won't. Yeah, the point of starting a job is that there's other people in there if you get your business big enough to do other small routine cog type machines.
Right. But in a world in a world where like a post automation world, would we have would we need well, I shouldn't say this. Would there be more entrepreneurs in a post automation world? Since most jobs are going to be automated, would there be more people like being entrepreneurs to basically like because the only element that machines couldn't entirely replace, at least not yet, is human creativity. Like, so would the more people become entrepreneurs because they'll be having to create some sort of unique, whether it's going to be like a whole new industry that'll come of this. Like, so right now I know a big thing is like social media marketing. That's becoming like a whole, I mean, not like a huge field, but it's a small field that's emerging as a result of.
Yeah, but it's still growing,
it's still growing. So would you have like these new fields that'll pop up to basically help people like replace that loss? Or do you think automation will just be so overwhelming that we'll literally have like anywhere from a third to half of our population that literally cannot have a job?
I think it's going to stem towards that way, and I don't think we're going to be as creative as we think we'll be, is my issue. Like I said before, like humans are built off of adaptation from stress and stress and stimulus, right? But I think we've seen time and time again, the majority of people without stimulus or stress, they create their own stress. You know what I mean? And it's not for creative purposes and self-actualization. That's like where we get a lot of the mental health issues, I think, of like extremely like depression and suicide and high anxiety, is because there is not an actual, qualitative problem. And so they make up their own smaller problems that they themselves are not equipped to deal with. So I feel like the utopia of, everyone has UBI and everyone can go do what they want because they don't need to be cogs in the machine, or they don't need to go hunt for their food, so to speak. Like, I think statistically, and I think we can see it now, like that's not going to be the case. That utopia is not real, that we're all just going to be free to do our own things. We wish we would, but I think time and time again, we've proven we can't. Just like people being like, oh yeah, most communism went bad, but we haven't tried true communism yet. It's that those people being super hyper idealistic and not realizing like that's not how humans work. And that's not how we have ever worked in the last 200,000 years.
Yeah. The whole, as much as I'm a big old, Star Trek fan, so do you understand like the economics and sort of the society of the world of like the Federation? Do you understand? Do you know what like?
Yeah, I know they're pretty. From what I understand, I didn't watch a lot of Star Trek. I was like a Star Wars guy, and then I transitioned to a Mass Effect guy, and I could talk for 18 hours about Mass Effect and ethics and philosophy. But we'll save that for another time. But I think just in general, I advocate everyone to play through the Mass Effect games and understand Mass Effect philosophy, because it's essentially Star Wars, but Star Wars is Eastern philosophy ideas yin and yang and balance and the force and those kind of communistic ideals. But Mass Effect is essentially Star Wars, but with Western ethics and Western thought and Western philosophicals. Like, if we did find true AI or other aliens or things like that, how many rights should they have? Should they be equal to humans? Should they be better to humans? Should we still treat them as slaves? Mass Effect asks a lot of those questions, and they give you a lot of good, healthy existential crises about that. So, but that's just a whole tangent. But yeah, I encourage everybody that likes to think about these kind of things we're talking about right now to study and play Mass Effect. They did it right, I think.
The whole thing with Star Trek was, at some point, basically, humanity abandoned they abandoned capitalism. It's funny, like, because the fans that look at such things will actually point out a lot of incongruities within the show. Like, so you have so everyone knows, you have the original series, you have the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and then you have the other spin-off series like Enterprise.
Yeah. And of course, we always have the Orville, which is, the true Star Wars or Star Trek. I actually really like the Orville.
No, I do too. It's very reminiscent of like early
OG.
So, but the thing is you learn on one of the movies. I mean, it's hinted at throughout the Next Generation as the show, but then in the movies they started to really expound on like the fact that humans have basically abandoned the need for like material wealth and acquiring of things. But then like throughout the show, people are still giving each other gifts and people are still talking about buying things, which I thought was funny. They're in Deep Space Nine. You get to meet like the Ferengi. So then they have there's one guy that runs like kind of like a gambling casino within a starbase run by Starfleet in Star Trek. So they're like, there is still kind of money, but the big thing was that they always pushed for was, humans no longer have the need to acquire money and wealth. Like, we have, our economy is to like better ourselves. So everyone in Starfleet is, the captains, everyone are all basically working to better themselves. Like, you become a captain because you feel good about becoming a captain. Like, that's the accomplishment. You're not really, people can feel like a service to, country, in this case, the Federation, but come on.
Yeah.
There's money, like there's something involved. Like, but then it changes because people are now more involved. Like, the motivations aren't really money anymore. The motivations are more about power. So they actually make that an interesting thing, but as a whole, like, no, like,
yeah,
it's perfect space communism is kind of what people joke about.
I think there's a little bit to it in that, like, currency and money in general is like a proxy for power. You know what I mean? Because I think power comes from options. Because people say knowledge is power, people say money is power, but the root of both of those is options. So the more powerful you are, the more options you have, and the more options you have, the more powerful you are, so to speak. It's kind of like that scarcity versus abundance mindset that talks a lot.
Right. Like, because money gives you options.
Yeah, it does. So I guess maybe if the select few, but I think we're going to go back to that Pareto principle where like 20% of the people would care about that. You know what I mean? The other 80% are just happy to sit on their couch, binge Netflix, and get their UBI,
Because, most people, I think, in the world of Star Trek, you don't get to see much of Earth, but they say the Earth has become a paradise. So there's replicators everywhere. You can get food wherever you want. They still have shops, but people just go in and, it's not like people are going around looting. They're just like, hey, let me get this, I'm going to get that. And they have, I guess, such overabundance that people apparently live these such fulfilled lives. And it's like,
which I think is, yeah. If humans do that, it's not going to be within the next, what is Star Trek's time frame? Like 100 years?
200 plus years.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen in that. Maybe thousands. Because we've had 10,000 years of agriculture and we still haven't acclimated to it.
I mean, even in like the world of Halo, like Halo is in like the 24 or 2500s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're still not that. And then I mean, granted, it's a video game, but it's funny. Even in there, like, we're still using freaking machine guns and bullets.
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. You think we would have developed past that with some good old fashioned lasers, but
Right. And yeah, and then of course it's still very like humans in that time frame are still very much the same. Like whereas in Star Trek, like by the time you're reaching the time of like the next generation, like everyone's like just they're very different people.
Mhm.
They've had a couple times they've shown like an interaction, like they found like three individuals that were in cryostasis. So it was like people from like the late 90s or something
Mhm.
that were basically frozen. And then they revived them, and now they're in the 23 something, and everything's different.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's just you can't that's just too large of a leap.
Yeah, I think
Mankind just a couple hundred years. Oh yeah, everything's great now. And it's funny they never actually dabbled into like putting stuff in your brain. So we talked about the because I kind of want to get into like different technologies and stuff that we've
yeah.
like looked at.
Yeah,
Um,
essentially the solutions to the problems we're all seeing, essentially.
right. It's funny in Star Trek, no one really has anything in their brain. Like they don't have any implants. But then that's like all we're talking about nowadays.
Mhm.
Like when it comes to futurism, is like in the next century, like humans will have like parts of our brains replaced with computers,
Mhm.
or at least implants to like help our brains do better. What do you think of that?
I think I think that is a solution a lot of people talk about, but I mean, it kind of goes back to the Jurassic Park analogy where like, yeah, we're researching that we could possibly do that soon. Like I've seen some estimates like 2050 or earlier, like in our lifetimes, but we're not thinking about like, is that a good thing? You know what I mean?
Do you think all that knowledge, like, so let's say we solve the problem. I know we talked about Google Brain, which
Mhm.
is some device that Google is conceptualizing to like put in the brain and basically download knowledge.
Yeah.
Like, imagine
Like surgical Google glasses. Yeah.
if you had, if you had the ability to basically assimilate all the knowledge of like Wikipedia or something.
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, there'd be a lot of nonsense in there, but let's say you got most of the like the useful stuff.
Yeah.
And you somehow were able to, then you solve the processing problem where you can process and understand it. Do you think that would make us like more productive? Like, would that solve that productivity problem? So now everything's automated, but we have all this knowledge at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of goes back to what you were talking about. Like, if you have two groups of inventors, but you give one a deadline and an incentive, and the other one no, like we need that deadline, that incentive, and that challenge to want to use that information for something. If everybody, had that utopia where you didn't need anything, I don't think we would use that to actually progress further. I think we would all just start getting real content and real comfortable, you know.
I mean, if we had some way of improving upon our brain and assimilating all of the knowledge out
Mhm.
there, do you think you ever watch the movie Limitless?
No, I don't think I've seen that one. Is that the one where he takes pills and he has like supernatural human thinking and hearing and seeing?
Yeah, well, Bradley Cooper takes this pill that basically there's a whole bunch of science that's not lining up with it, but basically it's what if you could access the entire scope of your brain's abilities.
Hmm.
So like he has like instant recall of everything, photographic memory of everything he's ever thought of and seen.
Hmm.
Um, and he's able to just process information like a lot faster. He's able to multitask quicker.
So he's essentially like a walking calculator, Wikipedia
A
type.
walking supercomputer, really.
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things that it goes into, like, okay, it's a huge strain on the brain and all this, but he takes the pills, he starts being able to like, he traded like $12,000 up to like $12 million within a month because he was like seeing market patterns like very easily. He
Instantly.
instantly, yeah. I mean, he was able to like gamble really easily because he could just see all the patterns of winning money off people,
Yeah.
all these different things. And where he talks about, well, he can encounters other people that can take the pill. He saw like what happens. So he was like he was like a slightly above average smart guy, but then the pill like gets to like a really stupid like mobster.
Hmm.
and it affects him differently, whereas if it's like a really, really smart person that takes it, that takes him into a different direction. So I just thought, like, if there was something close to that in the future where we, through technology, we're able to, like, we have brains that basically work faster, process quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow, if they're able to, like, create this without it, like, changing who we are.
Yeah. I think that would be really hard, though. You know what I mean?
At least it would, if anything, allow people to be more of themselves rather than different.
Yeah. Well, I think the question to ask for that is, how do you feel about the saying power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely? If everybody is absolutely powerful, like, what's that going to do to the world?
Not absolutely powerful. Like, we wouldn't be omnipotent. We would just have, time, multiple times over the computing power in our brain and access to the sum of all human knowledge. Some sort of that's another thing. Now, this is where it gets a little philosophical.
Mm-hmm.
If we're all like, so you take cloud technology, you take sort of the interconnectedness that we have now with phones, computers, like, we're connected.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think would, like, how it'd look? Like, would humans become like a pseudo hive mind almost if we're all connected in that way?
Kind of. Right now I'm thinking about it as an analogy to, like, guns, because we're essentially creating a great equalizer, right? It's no longer your biological drive or imperative that's making you stand out. It's, you have to have this or you lose. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I mean,
yeah. If you're in a war zone with a pocket knife and everyone else has assault rifles, you're not going to do very well. You know what I mean? It's that great equalizer. It doesn't matter how much karate and kung fu you study with knives if everyone else has guns. So that's the analogy I'm thinking of right now. If everybody's walking around with guns, is that better or worse? Because you're kind of forced into that if you want to survive and be any kind of competent.
Yeah. That's the thing, is because I'm just thinking of all the things you could do with whatever this artificial brain will be, like instant recall of anything you've ever come across, because it's just like a computer, and then being able to comprehend it. I mean, even like for guys like you and me, like if we want to learn something, we have to read it a few times.
Mm-hmm. Well, not me, because I'm special, but yeah, most people.
But imagine having the ability to not like having to read it so many times, but literally just have whatever that book is, like, integrated into your brain. You have like a program that is integral to how you operate, that is whatever material you read. I mean, heck, imagine if a guy just, like, downloaded the Rational Mail and basically read and understood it instantly.
Yeah, within microseconds.
But then it's not just that, like, the entire internet.
Yeah. But to me, it kind of goes back to that issue of guns. But I think another good analogy is like Incredible syndrome. If everybody's a superhero, then nobody's a superhero, because everyone has the same maximal powers. You know what I mean? Because I'm trying to think about it from a futuristic society aspect. Like, sure, it would be cool for me to be better.
Do you think we'll all be better for it, or will all be actually worse for it?
I mean, just look at the invention of the internet right now. Sure, a lot of strides came in because we could connect to people. Like right now, I'm talking to you, and you're about 1,200 miles away from me. That's a couple-day road trip. But we're able to talk right here, right now, in practically instant speeds. Data still has a small communication, so we might be off by like a half second or less. But think of all of the harm internet has done as well, because the us versus them mentality, like of politics and things we're talking about before, is now rapidly accelerated. It's on the motorcycle wave and not the horse and buggy wave. So I think that all goes back to the Jurassic Park analogy. We're like, yes, that would be cool. That would be awesome. But I don't think we're talking about the ramifications of doing that.
Right. I guess the primal drive, like human nature as a whole, is actually more pronounced rather than less pronounced, because us versus them is integral to human nature. Like it's not to say like, oh, this is where it gets into other things. People think, oh, then you're validating like racism and prejudice and all this. It's like, no. It goes down to the basic sense of like, I mean, the ability to tell the difference between a tree and a rock.
Yeah. That
is integral to how we are, like our nature. Like we, for the longest time, had to understand the differences. Like if I was walking down a trail and another guy was walking down the same trail and we came across each other and we're of different tribes, most of the time, one of us is dead.
Yeah.
Now take that and you apply it to society today, 7-8 billion people, and we've basically magnified that because thanks to the internet, us versus them is so much more, I guess, alluring. It draws us in more. So yeah, I mean, would knowledge change that though? You think? Like, could this new whatever human consciousness future change that? Like, you think that we'd be so into what our new abilities that maybe our human nature would be just kind of at least not like suppressed, but almost like kind of muted for a little bit?
Honestly, I think it might be the opposite. I think it would make us even more aggressive and more extreme. Because have you ever heard that phrase, proximity plus diversity equals war?
No.
Oh yeah.
For that one.
So, yeah. So that's a philosophical, and I think somebody pointed it to me. It was either Ryan Stone or Rollo or someone who said that in a podcast where they're talking about that. And it's from the Royce blog. I saw him write about that, but I know that's just like a common thing. But like essentially humans are diverse and we have our in groups and out groups, right? We have people, we identify with that. When you start increasing things like with the internet, I think it's super obvious. The proximity is now not you physically going into my territory, you physically, or someone else coming physically into my territory, or vice versa. It's now everybody is at your doorstep. Everybody's on your phone. Everybody is on your computer because of the internet. And so the problem with diversity and proximity is somebody's going to want eventually encroach on something else, right? That's the premise. And I think the internet is just doing that motorcycle wheelie 100 miles an hour into each other. And so proximity plus diversity equals war is that eventually you're going to start rubbing elbows with people that aren't in your in-group or think like you or things like that. And so the issue is people are always going to fight that utopia we were talking about before, where everybody just gives up their will to power and their personal individuation for the collective. You know what I mean? The one world government that solves all the problems. Like we're always going to fight that because that's eventually going to be somebody's culture fighting a different culture, right? So like we could talk here right now and it's like if everybody in the world understood red pill and everyone in the world understood these things that me and you were talking about because we're relatively in the same in-group, then everything would be better. You know what I mean? Because we feel like we're right. But as soon as you impose that on someone else and you get into their approximation, they're going to fight back. And it's not just, it's like tribal war, but with the minds and ideals and worldviews. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now, how would that fit? How do you think that would change if we had the ability to download and assimilate all of the information, or at least most of the information? So let's say, so in this world where humans have this engineered brain, where we can instantly download and assimilate information that we access from the internet. So, I go across to like, I know right now, I personally know, I know a few things relatively well. I'm not, but I'm not well versed in too many things. Like I know there's a handful of things I'm like really know, but then there's a couple of things, we dabble. Like,
yeah.
We read a little bit of, I personally, like I've talked to a handful of alt-right people. I've talked to communists. I've talked to socialists. I've talked to anarchists and all this stuff. Talked to these different types of people, but I'm not well versed in anything, in certain ideologies when it comes to that. But what if like now you have humans that go out into the world, everyone has this new brain, and we come across someone and we have a disagreement. We're like, hey, I think so and so, and I think that and that. And instead of sitting there and debating all day, which we could have a discussion because we're still human. I don't know.
Yeah. But would that discussion look like a 10x speed YouTube video because we could talk and think so fast?
There is that, but then what if like instead of, whereas that guy could like link up with me and it's like, okay, I believe these things. So then he said he basically shares with me anything he's ever read on the subject, all of the conviction, what he associates with those like convictions he has or certain things he has. And then at the same time, I can say, well, here's why I disagree. So we basically share information via this brain to basically, maybe not instantly, but at least in a very short amount of time, like minutes, understand each other.
Yeah.
And then we come to an understanding like, oh, so then he looks at me and goes, and then he maybe can actually go further and say, okay, I'm going to run a simulation of my brain, the computer, to like see if that actually makes more sense. So, whether that's going to make people more accepting of certain ideologies and less accepting of others. Like, and imagine the open marketplace of ideas, except on steroids. It's instantly shared. Everyone's able to understand each other's ideas very quickly. Because
I think there's a difference between sharing information and understanding somebody's position. Because
he's also sharing like memories though too.
Yeah.
So let's say, well, I believe, so like you tend to see a pattern behind like people who maybe adopt more like socialism or let's just say left-leaning ideals and right-leaning ideas when it comes to, let's say, economics or politics. So then people of those two spectrums, let's say they exchange ideas, not just the ideology, but also like the convictions behind it. Somehow we're able to like share memories. Like, oh, these things happen in my life. So in a way, you're kind of getting to know someone. Like I'm talking about interconnectivity on a scale like you could almost instantly know someone and what they believe and why they believe it.
Yeah, I think that could work on an individual scale, but I don't think it's going to work on a societal scale, I think is the issue.
But then people we come across who could just, oh, hey, you, hey, you, like, boop, exchange. Yeah. Oh, now we like know each other a little bit. Like another, I guess that would be like the next level of communication. So you've heard about like the term the singularity.
Go a little farther into that.
It's like the technological singularity. There's different ways you can look at it, but basically it's like a point of no return in human development where something basically takes us into a new realm of understanding and development. So some will call like the emergence of language as a singularity. So when humans or whatever being, whatever we were, of the Homo genius back then, when language came about, it was never the same again. Like the way we were after language and the way we were before language is completely different. It's like a whole new almost plane of existence, because now I can actually communicate with you. I'm not just waving around tools and making, body language gestures. Like I can actually speak a word. I pick a bone and I make a couple sounds with that. I pick up a rock and there's different sounds with that. We are communicating. We can actually cooperate easier. But think about it. Imagine you and I trying to communicate without language.
Yeah.
So they consider that
it would basically just be a different species of primate. You know what I mean?
But I mean, what language brought us to like now writing, just technology as it is. Like we had to actually communicate on a large scale and cooperate in some sense to create all these things thanks to language. Now imagine the next singularity, I think, is sort of where the human brain or we would basically become so interconnected that simple speech and body language won't cut it.
Yeah, but I mean, I always get asked that question, is that a good thing? You know what I mean? Because I don't know if I'm speaking for everybody, but like I still have an animalistic nature. And I kind of like that. I think that's where individualism comes from, is understanding yourself separate from other people. But if we had a hive mind consciousness, you are removing yourself as an individual. You're now human number 1,842, right? You are now essentially a shell for for any person to go in and out of, which is also a Mass Effect concept, but because that's essentially how AI would work. Is you'd have millions of minds, but the bodies are disconnected. They're just platforms, they're vehicles, right? But I still think we have a concept of consciousness in ourself, the sense of self. We would be eliminating that if we did create a full hive mind. And that's the thing I don't think I
want. That's the thing, hive mind, because that's where it gets different too, is you have, Star Trek really pushes against that, like the Borg. The Borg were these species that basically had a hive mind, and their whole way of, I guess, continuing their species was they would find civilizations with significant technology and abilities that they wanted, and they'd go in with their drones, they'd assimilate them, they would turn them into their own, eliminate their individuality, and become part of the collective. Because and then the collective's goal was to achieve like perfection, was what they kept saying.
And I mean, if you think about it, technically the Star Trek Federation side also did that, but to a different degree or a different version.
They still allowed for individualism.
Yeah. If we're a collective one world order, like you did have to give up certain freedoms for that to happen, to completely believe in your own thing. You're still going to have to go off of some Federation law or regulation or belief to be a part of that culture, right? Even if you disagree with it. So you're still going to have to give up something of yourself for that.
Yeah.
Right.
When the show came out, they really tried to dabble in like talking about Federation law, and like apparently the Federation had a constitution with a supposed Bill of Rights, very similar to the U.S.'s Bill of Rights. Like, granted, it's back in like the 80s and 90s when this came out, so they never touched on things like we touch on, like, hate speech or anything, but it was relatively the same. Like, there's freedom of speech, there's freedom of, there was aspects of, like, I guess, libertarianism too. Like, there's freedom of movement. Like, people could just, because they didn't have to pay any fares or anything, they just hop on a transport and they just go somewhere, go to a planet, go to a colony. You do things, but still no money.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you think about it, I don't know if this is my original idea or something I read and I forgot where, but like there is a thing where like security and freedom and the interrelation between the two, I think, are diametrically opposed. Every time you increase the security, you have to remove a freedom, and vice versa.
Benjamin Franklin said something about that.
Yeah. So like the more free you are, the more unsecured you are, which is like, full on survival of the fittest, and cap if you wanted to. It's kind of like that, where it's full freedom with no security, or people are trying to go full security with no freedom, right? Or some kind of balance in the middle.
Okay.
No matter what, you can't have it all,
Those who would trade security for freedom. Well, what is it? Those who would give up liberty to purchase, who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety, deserve neither. Anyone who would want to trade security for freedom, trade freedom for security.
Yeah.
Will get neither and deserve none. Something like that.
Yeah. And I think that's what one of the root issues is like when you're looking at collectivism and you're looking at a one global government, to try to solve all the problems, that's a very high security idea with a very low freedom, right? It's definitely pushing the scales of security when you remove the individual for the sake of the greater good. And so that's why I'm usually very against that, because I like being Conk. I like being myself. I like having my own ideas and free speech and all of those things. But you'd have to remove a lot of those if you wanted to do the big grand collective for the greater good.
How would you? Okay, so let's just say hypothetically, the entire planet became the United States of Earth. Like somehow
Yeah.
the U.S. like everyone sort of
One, you said.
joined the one America basically.
Yeah, one. Yeah,
um, and we still had all the same freedoms, Bill of Rights, and all that. You'd still be able to be you though. Like you can be you now, and you'd still be you in that world, wouldn't you?
yeah, but think about all the other 200 countries that weren't America before and how much they lost.
Or gained, especially third world countries.
Yeah, but that's a matter of perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, I
If
mean,
the hyper left feminist ideal came true, me and you weren't allowed to be libertarians or anarchists, right? We now have to conform to their culture.
right.
You just got to think about it. It's a matter of perspective of what you're gaining or losing.
We need like a 1776 America in a modern world. Like, take that framework and apply it to the whole planet. I think we'd be fine then.
Yeah, but now you're oppressing the socialists and the communist big government people.
Yeah, they'll get over it.
You're okay with that? That's diversity plus proximity.
I know. That's the thing is like, yeah, more freedom, but it's funny. You're actually, it's almost because that would be basically it's both for and against libertarian ideals, because then what we'd be against is now we're intervening in other countries' affairs by changing their entire regime to fit our own.
Yeah,
but at the same time we're also setting them free of like real oppressive regimes, so it's like a conflict.
Yeah, but now we're the oppressive regime because we're oppressing their beliefs. Like my main example is always like, the hardcore Sharia law Muslim countries that believe in hijabs and all of these things and stoning homosexuals. Me and you agree those are probably bad ideas, but the act of us taking that away from them and instituting our Constitution and Bill of Rights, you know what I mean? That's a declaration of war, right? Even though we think we're doing the greater good. But at the end of the day, we are still oppressing them through forcing them to do our version of what's the right thing.
Yeah. That's what's tricky about it.
Yeah. That's a lot of this comes from Jack Donovan's becoming a barbarian. And it's, he's very pro tribalism and like us versus them is natural, but it's almost the don't tread on me, swing your arms as much as you want, as long as you don't hit somebody principle, where it's okay to have an in-group and an out-group. We all do it innately. It's just some people like the hyper-left like to act like they don't, even though they do. It's pretty obvious, looking at it from the other side. But like that's part of human nature. And I think that all routes back to when we were talking about of collectives and having that extreme, superhuman Google brain stuff. Like that's still part of our nature, is us versus them at the end of the day. I don't think we're going to be able to quell that without removing individual freedom. That's eventually going to leave. Yeah.
So where do you think we're actually going to go?
To me, just based on my observations, and it's going to sound aggressive, but I think it's very conservative. I would say 2050 to 2075. If we haven't evolved past our motorcycle wheelie and we haven't gotten to the finish line, it's going to collapse. I think we're going to go like not just collapse like, oh, another Great Depression or something, but honestly, I'm thinking like Mad Max type crap. So it's getting extreme. So I'm very pro like day prepping for people. And,
so like
of it now.
Some big old EMP is just going to take out like most of the world or something.
No, I think like we're all running on cogs in a machine. The only reason our current government works and our current societal structure works is because people are plugged into it. But the problem is now the gears are fighting each other over really dumb stuff like racism and sexism, like I was talking about before. So unless we get to that next progressive leap, which, I even have doubts that's even a good thing. I think we should start going backwards now before it's too late. Because, the farther you're in the machine and the more you depend on the machine, when it breaks, it's going to be that much worse. The more we're relying on the government and the school system and all of these economics to function, when it does break down, which it inevitably will. I don't think you can find any person in the world that thinks the America as it is right now will be the same forever. Like this is just the way it is, right?
Right.
There's going to be a change, and it's either going to be a progression or a collapse. and I'm betting in my lifetime. So
now we talked about conflict and stuff, like how conflict, like without conflict, like we get bored.
yeah,
Without some sort of, I mean,
you have to get depressed and anxious too.
yeah. We get depressed, anxious, bored, and yeah. Funny thing, because the last real, like, I mean, we had World War II, and that spurred a lot of innovation. Like people say, you look at the military innovations that came out of World War II is crazy.
Yeah.
You look at, and then of course you have, you had a couple wars and stuff, and we're technically still having wars now. But as a general thing, like we're probably experiencing the most peace we've ever had in a while. Like as a human, ever since the dawn of like civilization as we know it. Now, with that, since there's so much peace, like really the best course of action is some sort of conflict, right?
Yeah.
So Brooke brought this up. He said he read some article or something that theorized that the next real conflict that we could possibly have is a war with Mars. And I was like, wait, what? Aliens? He goes, no. Like, so we go to Mars, and a lot of people start going there.
Yeah.
And now there's a conflict between Earth and Mars because Mars wants to become independent.
It's essentially the Birth of America Part 2, right?
Yeah, there'd be some sort of like there'd be a civil war. Well, civil war. I mean, it'd be a war with Mars. So then the Earth would probably fracture because of it. Mars would become unified somehow, and it would be a very long. He said it'd be like a century-long war because Mars and Earth don't always line up, like in the.
So you're waiting for it to rotate, then you shoot your missiles, and then wait another year.
Something. I mean, it would be like a long, drawn out sort of like a very lukewarm type of war.
Yeah.
But that would be the conflict that could drive us just a little bit to like maintain our sanity as a society.
Oh yeah. I've read a lot of interesting stuff, and it's funny because you brought up aliens slightly, and I didn't know if we wanted to go down this rabbit hole, but
we could go aliens, yeah.
Yeah. So it feels weird to even bring up unless I can fully explain it. But there is some documents, I was talking to you before, that there is some actually declassified documents you can read right now about UFOs and space and things like that. And some of the ones I've been reading, and I can send you the link to them when we're done with this, or maybe we can put it in the description or something. But some of the classified documents are like from the 40s and 50s and 60s of like CIA and military officials talking about how to use UFOs for psychological warfare.
Now, being specific here, UFOs as in alien UFOs or human UFOs? Like,
there's actually both. So that's a lot of the documents agree with both, which is kind of cool.
I try to kind of stick with, I guess it's like everyone's kind of probably heard a lot about these Area 51 memes.
Oh yeah, I'm on my way to Storm. You know what I mean?
Storm.
Backed up my Nerf guns and my.
People are like, yeah, they can't. We're gonna. What is it? September 20th. They're gonna storm UFO. Not UFOs. Storm Area 51 because the guards can't stop all of them. And there's like a whole bunch of jokes. Like, there's a meme that's like, how I'm gonna be walking in. To Area 51, how I'm going to be leaving Area 51, and it's like,
and then they're in like Halo vehicles and stuff.
Exactly. Oh yeah, it's funny. So, but in reality, I mean, as far as the public really knows, and I think most of Area 51, I tend to agree, it's probably just like, I mean, really, it's just a secret Air Force like prototype testing hangar, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we don't know, and it's really interesting because actually the president doesn't know usually as well. There's some of those documents on the website that talk about JFK knew. Eisenhower got refused after World War II. He asked for access and he got refused, and he went public about it. It was really interesting stuff. Bill Clinton got refused, and James Woolsey, who was the head of the CIA at the time.
Wasn't it Clinton or someone that was like joking about like if they became president, they would tell the world.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton said that, but it's like, to me, it sounds like a funny joke, but that's got a lot of serious implications in it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if she got assassinated if she became president and actually went through with that.
I wonder if Trump knows.
Yeah. Yeah, like the guy I was telling you that had that document and went with Bill Clinton and James Woolsey to ask about Area 51 stuff and got denied security clearance. The president, he that's what like really started his digging up in that. And apparently JFK knew, and he said there's a lot of talks around his and Marilyn Monroe's assassination in some of the stuff too. So it's kind of crazy that some of that cat was getting out of the bag. And I know it sounds crazy, but there is some leaked documents that you can actually Google right now and find the PDF scans of documents. So including like wiretaps.
I wonder if it's literally like the most need to know basis type of thing. Like some presidents need to know about it, and some presidents they don't. Like there could be just periods of time where they don't need the attention of a president, and so they'll deny it. And then other times where it's like, okay, we can kind of trust this guy. There's a bit of a crisis, maybe that we just never know about, and now we need the president.
But I think, also Obama got denied access. The guy who worked with Bill Clinton also worked with Obama, and Obama also got denied access. So, and he was there for both of those, which I think is really interesting. And Bill Clinton's kind of involved in that. Well, like one of the original people, him and James Woolsey were actually pushing for it. And so when Hillary Clinton said that, like, that really sketched me out. Like that's another assassination attempt, I think. And I think it all alludes to that there is a part of the United States government that is above our 3-branch system. Eisenhower, after he got denied, he actually said in the State of the Union, all future Americans after my election or whatever, or after I'm done being president, be wary of the military-industrial complex. He said that in the State of the Union on TV because he was denied access. Yeah, so that's some crazy stuff, and it sounds like crazy conspiracy theories, but like you can look up the YouTube video of President Eisenhower saying that. Yeah, you can find those websites that have all the leaked PDF scans, so you can go and click on them in your own computer. And it's pretty nuts. So I think I'm not full scaled on like aliens being alive and controlling the government kind of crap, but I think UFOs, we have so much ridiculous photo and video and radar evidence. There's actually some radar stuff they kept of things being pinged that like it's eerily silent how we stopped talking about it, and now it's only like a tabloid mocking thing. Like it was a serious thing in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and then it completely blanked into cartoons. You know what I mean? And so to me, that's sketchy. I'm not saying I guarantee believe one way or the other, but you can't deny that is sketchy, that we completely changed our thoughts on that kind of technology.
The topic of conspiracy theories intrigues me because some of them, like, I really like. I enjoy like what they question, and it kind of brings to like. So I did an episode on another podcast with some people I know, and we talked about like conspiracy theories. Some of them were really interesting. Just to briefly touch on that, one guy talked about cryptozoology. So it's like Bigfoot, like basically animals we don't know about.
Yeah. And there's thousands, like we barely know our own ocean. You know what I mean?
And there's been like credible zoologists, like very well-known zoologists that have seen creatures multiple times, but they've never had the opportunity to like document and sort of catalog as a new animal. And so it's not just like some farmer sees a thing and lots of monster. It's like
that's what a lot of alien things right now are. Is somebody killed my cattle and stole my corn and probed me. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's how we get nowadays. But it was a legitimate scientific effort, 50, 60 years ago.
Right, and then I think so. Then I talked about like I talked about 9/11 conspiracy theories, and here's what I said. Like I personally I see a lot of polls and I see a lot of information, and there's a couple of inconsistencies with some of the plane crashes and all that. I have no doubt that the government or whatever organization was involved is totally capable of pulling off some sort of conspiracy. Do I believe there's a conspiracy? Not. I'm like pretty much 50-50.
Yeah,
But
it's
if new
possible. They're
evidence,
open to it. Yeah.
but if new evidence came out in the future or something where basically they had some concrete way to basically say, okay, the government was kind of involved, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
But I'm not like, 9/11 was and it's like I see it, but I also not gonna, put my finger on it, so to speak. So especially like same thing with aliens and Area 51 and all that, like there's a lot that says, I mean, I believe I'm like 90% believe like aliens exist.
Mhm.
Have they been here? That's almost a 50-50 thing.
Yeah.
Know?
Yeah, I could see that because a lot of people's issue, like how people try to dismiss aliens right now is like, well, if we travel at the speed of light, like the next closest habitable planet is, hundreds of thousands or millions or billions light years away, So therefore, even if they were alive and came to find us, we won't see it within human civilization because they have to travel that far. But I mean, there is alternative propulsion systems. And that's what I was talking about before with the car. Like, it's weird that we have this gasoline engine for 100 plus years. That's not normal for humans. We've been evolving things so fast that it's weird that we're not progressing.
The closest planets that are possibly habitable are actually like well within a dozen light years.
Oh, really?
So the Alpha Centauri system, which is about 4 light years away, has a couple planets that could be habitable.
Mm-hmm.
Not as close to like the Goldilocks, kind of what they call Goldilocks, like perfect Earth-like planets, but those are the closest Earth-like planets, like pretty close to us, are probably within a couple hundred light years.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it's like different ways of propulsion and better ways of building a ship. Like there's been talk like humans will build a ship that will basically reach half the speed of light or 3/4 the speed of light, that could get places. And
Yeah.
But
I think the real thing though is we need to think about alternative sources, because I feel like even trying to reach the galaxy, we're gonna have to do something faster than light, because light has limitations. Even though we don't like to talk about it, at the end of the day, light does have limitations. It does have a very insignificant amount of mass. It does get influenced by black holes. Like, there's got to be a way to do that when you talk about space time. And this is getting really heady. You know what I mean? Talking about astrophysics and stuff, but like the concepts of bending space time. So instead of you trying to physically travel from here to here, we're now bending space time. So now it's only like 10 feet away instead of 2,000 light years away.
Well, that's where you get into like, so warp drive. There was a guy, a French physicist, coined the term, well, using his own name, of course, the Alcubierre drive. So what it is we would have some sort of a engine that would use a type of exotic matter that is not naturally occurring that we would have to like somehow extract, like from a large hadron collider kind of thing. And it could, using similar principles to warp drive. So what warp drive did was they basically, in Star Trek, it was like basically they projected a bubble around the ship that would allow them to basically slide through space, without suffering the effects of like relativity, of like time slowing down or speeding up or whatever,
and gravitational forces on you for moving,
right, moving that fast. And then of course they they had a nice little plot device called inertial dampeners, which basically saved your ship from save your crew from splattering in the back of the ship. All that. So the Alcubierre drive, he said, uses a similar thing where it would squeeze and contract space in front and behind you in a way that the ship is not moving at the speed of light, but space itself, because we've theorized that space itself moves faster than light. Like the universe is expanding faster than the speed of light.
Yeah.
We use that principle to basically squeeze, like move space around the ship.
Yeah. So in theory, you're standing still, but everything else is moving around you, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, relatively speaking, you're moving.
Yeah.
But it's not you, because we can't move faster than light, but space can move faster than light around us,
Yeah.
which is weird.
Yeah. And I think it's weird because those kind of propulsion systems, like you think, especially like around nuclear bomb Roswell time, like there was a lot of interest in that, and then it just stopped. It went dead silent.
Well,
And then
the
you
energy
start finding all of these things where the president can't even know about it. So to me, I'm just putting two and two together, and I think those are being developed. But
the energy
don't go off
required
so
is
much.
ridiculous.
Yeah, you're trying to connect dots. It's hard to get hard evidence on that.
Yeah, they used to think that something like that would take. So like the mass energy principle, like, let's say, okay, if I converted, so I have a tape measure here. If I converted the mass of this purely into energy, it could be, I don't know, a couple of nukes.
Yeah.
If purely into energy, so like nothing is left of that. So the mass equivalent energy wise would be, they said they used to think it was like the mass of Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
Now it could be the mass equivalent of a small satellite, but that's still a lot of energy. Like,
yeah. But I think it's interesting going back to talking about the types of civilization. Those are all using like theories and means of what we have right now, like using the Earth's resources or using the sun's resources. But like, in basic physical matter has its own resources, and even in empty space, there's actually energy.
Right.
It can't move unless there's something there to move, right? So I've seen a lot of people talking like that, but a lot of those get debunked and classified up every time somebody tries to do that. I can't remember the name of it, but somebody said, I remember there was some kind of project in the 70s where a guy was using an alternative energy source that was essentially taking the space around it, but you have to put a crazy amount, like hundreds of thousands of volts into something, but then it would make millions or billions of volts back. And it was a sense of energy using around empty space around it. And that got confiscated immediately and depatented by the government, or they patented up or something like that. I would have to look it up, but there was information and videos and like pictures of the guy building this and it working, and then out of nowhere, dead silence. So it's very interesting, and I think it kind of goes back to the whole we need to be cogs in a machine to keep things going. And it might just be a protection factor so that society doesn't collapse. Is the benevolent reason, I think, but I don't think it is the benevolent reason. So
people I've talked to when I talk about space exploration, like a lot of people tend to see, like, try to look at the more virtuous side of human nature, like, oh yeah, we're humans, the human drive to like explore and get out there. And it's like, yeah, but do you know how we got to the moon? Russians.
Yeah.
Like, Russians told us Russians were like, well, we're gonna go there first, and we're like, no, we're gonna go first, and then we got there. Like, Neil deGrasse Tyson made a joke. He said, if you want to realistically, not that anyone would do this, I don't know if anyone could pull it off, but someone needs to fake a Chinese government memo and leak it to the US government, says that Chinese plan on building a base on Mars in the next decade, and the US will get there in 5 years.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, we'll get there in half the time. There's like that whole human need for conflict and challenge,
Right. The space race. Like, the only way we're really going to get into space, especially when it involves governments, is a space race. Like, Elon Musk and all these guys, they're going to do their thing, but they're funded by a lot of government contracts. It's a reason why they can do all this.
That's always been my theory, is like Elon Musk is going to make it to Mars, but the guy after him is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, space mining is only going to work once. Like, so NASA sends a couple of satellites out, and they drop a few on asteroids, and they figure out, oh look, there's this much palladium or platinum, and then people like SpaceX are going to launch a whole fleet of ships to go out and mine dry all these asteroids. The government usually takes the first step of like risk, and then the corporations come along and say, oh, now that the risk has been properly assessed, let's actually invest.
Yeah. That's good. So
that's
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Oh no, I was just gonna say basically like that's the thing is people don't quite understand like the human drive for competition and like this capitalistic drive is still gonna be it's gonna play a larger role in how we get to the stars. It's not gonna be just, oh, we just, kind of kumbaya, hold our hands, and we're gonna fly this, Earth ship to
Yeah.
made ship all the way to the stars. It's gonna be companies and people that are like have vested interest to do this. Like, we're gonna have a base on, we might have a small base on the moon that the government's going to use for like research, but then within the next, couple decades, you're going to have resorts and casinos on the moon.
Yeah. All right. So I want to start wrapping this up because I realize I got to be somewhere in about 20 minutes. So,
okay.
But as this is my final point, I think we should give our final thoughts on is I think we covered right now sucks. Here's some alternative futures, you know what I mean, that we could be investing in or could be happening. It's essentially an arms race for humanity. This is what it is. It's either this, or this technology will happen in 50 or 100 years, or it's all going to go to shit, right? What's your bet? Are you betting it's going to go to shit, or is one of these technologies going to advance, and which one would you put your money on? Whether it be AI, space colonization, designer babies, which we didn't get into, but it's a very fun subject.
I think AI is a very real possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Like AI, hopefully not the word. I mean, I'm like 60% on it not going to not going to hell. Like, movies with AI like taking over humanity and killing people, that type of thing. Oh, yeah. Or like you ever watched Transcendence? Johnny Depp?
I don't think I have. No. Is that the one where he becomes like an AI entity and
he becomes an AI
human transition to AI?
Yeah, and they basically
I think Chappie talked about that too, and Chappie's version was very funny. But
no, they basically in this world in the movie, basically they've come to understand that AI cannot be synthesized, but can only be created by copying an existing brain.
Mm-hmm.
So they copy Johnny Depp's brain because he's in the movie, he's dying.
Yeah.
And then he becomes an AI and like literally just takes over the world.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I think honestly, I think that's reasonable. But because especially if you're creating an AI that's all that omnipotent or mostly potent, if it's not omnipotent.
Yep.
But it still has the human drives and will to power, as Nietzsche called it.
You got to watch that, and it actually shows a lot of interesting things because it kind of goes down the path of you gotta watch it to see what he does, because there's actually a huge downside to it. Like they find out like it's a bad thing. So but yeah, AI is a good thing that I think if we properly do it, it could be really good. Like, having like a cloud access to some sort of like a super Siri that I can just like not just have a conversation, not just like access information from, but maybe even like have a conversation with to help me like, optimize my schedule or something, or my, different things I do.
And if you go even farther, like the movie Her, you could start dating them.
Oh God.
If you implant enough personality and thought processes into a Siri type device, like it's going to mimic consciousness and personality.
Oh yeah. VR and all that, VR and sex dolls and all this stuff. Like, geez, we didn't even get into that either, but
actually I'm very pro virtual reality right now. I'm still leaning towards doomsday, but I think VR is a good step forward if we are going for the progression.
Oh, it could be fun. Yeah. Because it's just, you could do fun stuff. So yeah, AI could be good. And excuse me, with the whole thing with the brain, I mean, because you brought a lot of good points to it. So I'd say like being able to augment our brains and connect to the internet and access information, that's gonna happen. I'm starting to question if that could be a net good.
Yeah,
those are the two things.
You're still bringing in the human's will to power into omnipotent level stuff, just like with guns.
But then it could be coming down to like, what if certain humans access only certain kinds of information? Like, if your conspiracy theorists get a hold of this stuff, like it gets implanted in their brain. Well, I don't know why they would, because they'd be too paranoid to get connected.
Yeah.
But let's just say some did, and then they access only like they're literally downloading and assimilating WikiLeaks all day.
Mhm.
You know, might be really, really paranoid.
Yeah. So if I had to place my bet, I'm like 60-40 on societal collapse. It's not a lot, but I think it's almost like Occam's razor. Like, what's worse off, planning for doomsday and it doesn't happen, or trying to progress the future but it doesn't work out and it does become doomsday? Like, to me, you're better off betting on doomsday prepping than not. So that's just my personal opinion right now.
Do you have a shelter?
I have. I'll talk about it later. But I'm currently investing in dog breeding and alternative currency. So, and I'm not talking like cryptocurrency. I'm talking like what physical materials will have the most worth outside of society.
Oh, like gold and silver.
Be traded and print, could still be traded and counted and quantified, but also has a quality of life and a use. Because, a paper dollar doesn't mean jack shit if we're in a Mad Max world, right?
It's like gold and silver, right?
Yeah, more than that, I think. I think the big one is going to be seeds. I think seeds are going to be really important.
Seeds. I've heard people say, like, if you want proper doomsday prepping, you want to pack a lot of toilet paper.
Yeah. Yeah, but at the end of the day, we're eventually going to have to go back to not using that. You're like, nobody's going to go in a Mad Max world, go try to restart a toilet paper company. Like, they're not going to hole up in Charmin and try to run the machines.
No, but if you have a lot of Charmin, you'll be like, hey, can I get some food for this toilet paper? Like,
yeah.
Get the roll and you get
work for about a year or two, and then we're going to run out of supply and not going to create anymore. So
yeah,
that'll be. I think that's a small scale use. But
get a huge ass stock, and then watch the price of toilet paper go up.
Yeah, have you ever seen those extreme couponing people on YouTube and on TV where they buy like $3,000 worth of toilet paper and cleaning equipment and cleaning stuff, and it costs them like $3,
or they coupon so much that the store actually pays them.
Yeah, and most places actually won't do that. You just have to buy things. So I saw some lady that would buy like $500 to $1,000 worth of cleaning supplies, and then it would come up to like -$80, and then she'd go buy some meat, and that was their dinner for the next couple of weeks, was a bunch of free meat. So she didn't even need the cleaning supplies. She's just stockpiling it, and she said she donates half of it, to like charities and homeless shelters and stuff. But she just does couponing to pay for her groceries because she found ways to constantly get it at a net negative. And then you go, oh, we can't give you $100, but here's $100 of meat. You ring in with it, and it just routes out to zero.
Oh, that's pretty smart, actually.
Yeah, so it's almost like a side hustle where you're technically making money, but it can only be the currency can only be used at that store at that time.
What's the other thing that you're kind of betting on?
Yep. So the AI, I think, is the next closest because it's more obvious in your face. There's a lot of media coverage about it being good or bad or different types. I think if we go the download a human mind mode, and like that opens a lot about the nature of consciousness, because it's starting to turn from a metaphysical concept into a technical concept, just like people used to think about gravity or flying. You know what I mean? Those used to be cool metaphysical things to talk about, but now they're literal. You know what I mean? That we can talk and manipulate that. Consciousness is now near that bridge of gap of like us being able to study and understand it more than we could before, instead of it just being a metaphysical, philosophical concept of self and consciousness. That's actually being researched more. So, but if we go that human consciousness route, like you were saying with Transcendence or like with Chappie, because that movie does talk about very similar things of downloading humans. I think that's going to be guaranteed bad. But if we go the full robot mode, AI, where it's a code, a computer intelligence that can write its own code and learn by itself, I think it will outgrow us and become indifferent of humans. I don't think it's going to kill us like Will Smith and iRobot and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I
because
think it's going to become its own species and do its own thing, and it's going to travel the galaxy without us.
Because the thing with the whole like AI is going to kill humans because it's going to realize like we're the plague, we're the virus on the planet. Like it realizes like the planet's more important than us. That's how we would think.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but we haven't.
A computer wouldn't care.
But like true AI, like people aren't going to, you're going to code and you're going to teach how to think, but I don't think human nature works that way where somehow like our nature is going to imprint on the AI. Like it's going to learn on its own. It's going to be amoral and purely logical just with code. And it's going to go, oh, well, yeah, there's these things and, it's probably going to weigh the good and the bad. It's going to weigh us in a very amoral and probably very aethical too. Kind of just look at us like, they consume, they do this, but they improve and they do this. I don't really care. Like, it's not going to be like, oh, it's not going to see us through the lens of sort of like an amoral human. You can look at it through an amoral program, basically just go, oh, yeah, that's how it is.
Yeah, I think it'll just try to solve problems and equations. It doesn't really use, emotion to dictate its actions like a lot of humans do. You know what I mean? They can just do full calculations, full algorithms for everything. And it'll just solve problems with the least amount of murder if the murder is necessary. So I think if we use the human brain, it's going to go bad and a lot of things are going to die. But if we use full AI learning for itself, it's just going to evolve past us and we'll essentially be domesticated dogs to the robots.
Right.
We're not going to be slaves or murdered or genocided, but they're just not going to, they're going to, I think they'll see no reason to keep humans around, like to actually protect and serve us. We'll just be a different random animal species on the world, and they're going to go do their own thing.
Right. All right. We got to wrap it up because you got to get going here. But
yeah,
I was actually just pulling up your social media here. So you're only on, as Conk, you're only really on Twitter, right?
Twitter and YouTube. I have just the introductory video, making sure the setup works. I will be making content for Red Pill and religion type stuff. I have a lot of thing. I think I have like 27 videos written down in my my journal here of things I think I can expand on and help on with the Red Pill community. And so I just kind of call myself the Red Pill chaplain, just kind of like an army or a hospital chaplain, because I think spirituality is important to a man's life. And I think a lot of people are asking those questions and we don't have enough talking heads talking about it. So
right,
I'm going to start doing that. And then I also have Twitter. I also moderate on Rollo and Rich Cooper's channel. So you can always find me there when they're live.
Yep. Thanks once again for coming on, man.
Oh yeah, no problem. This is my pet project right now. So is talking about futurism.
Right now, okay. So for the audience, do follow Conk on Twitter. It's at Vanguard_Conk. It's basically the Spartan helmet looking.
Yeah.
And of course, now your YouTube channel. Do you go by Conk on YouTube?
Yeah, I think it's just Conk, CONK.
Okay.
Yeah, just Google that. It's gonna have the same gladiator helmet, yada yada. Because I really love Roman and Greek culture, but
not CONCH.
No, conch. You cannot hear the ocean through me.
But yeah, follow him and of course check out his one video. But yeah, check out his tweets there. I know you did a talk on Rollo Tomasi's channel with Religion and the Red Pill.
Yeah.
You've yet to go on Rich's channel yet, but
yeah. I randomly special guest on before the train wreck. Sometimes I'll run in and ask questions and clarify stuff, but that's about it. So you'll see my face on there maybe every other episode for 5 or 10 minutes, but that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah. Thanks everyone for watching today. Thank you for joining us. Thanks once again to Conk for coming on the channel. Follow him on Twitter. Check out his YouTube channel. Check us out next week when Brook will be back. He'll be back next week, and we'll be back onto our regular shows. I'm not going to talk about who we might have on later on because we're still kind of working out some details. But we're hoping to do more episodes at least twice a week. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you guys probably either Thursday or Sunday. We're still figuring that out. So thanks for watching, guys.
All right. Have a good one.